Welcome back to Stars and Myths. There are countless creation myths across the world, but they are not randomly distributed. When you map them globally, some motifs display striking complementary distribution. When one story predominates, the others are generally absent. And this episode delves into this specific pattern, particularly looking at the motifs shared at the geographic boundaries between mythological regions. We explore this interface that reveals much about how myths propagate. The first myth family explains how the earth formed from a tiny piece of mud brought from the bottom of the primeval ocean by an animal, typically a bird, and we call it therefore the bird diver. Among the Yakut in Siberia, a traditional story recounts a time when only primeval water existed. A loon dived, pulling out several grains of sand in its beak, and this sand expanded, and so land was created. You find similar stories in North America, but they are mostly linked to the recreation of the world after a great flood. Typical story is the following. You have an old man figure that instructs animals to dive and try to get some mud. The first animal try doesn't succeed, and so on and so on. And after several attempts by different creatures, a muskrat very often, but could be a bird, successfully returned from the depths with little piece of clay on its paw. And the old man then used that clay to create the earth, the mountains, and trees. In contrast to the earth diver myth, which describes the creation from primal water, the second myth explains the emergence of man from deep within the earth. In some tradition, the place of emergence is still known and represented symbolically in a building. Here it's an image of Mesa Verde in Colorado, and a small hole represents the place of emergence where men are said to have primarily emerged. Many other creation myths exist worldwide, but these two motifs, Earth diver and emergence, are special because their distribution roughly divides the globe into two vast mythological regions. A bird diver is mostly found in the northern region of Eurasia and North America. You see here the blue dots. In contrast, the emergence stories found in most other areas, particularly in the Americas, south of the subarctic, part of Oceania, and Africa. And I'd like to point out, if you look here at the boundary between the blue and the red dot in America, you see that at the interface, both motifs are found. They are the black dot points. So we have identified the main division of creation myths in the world. But it's one more layer that is quite interesting related to another creation myth, which is called the cosmic egg. This motif is found on many continents, including ancient Egypt, ancient Persia, ancient India, and even the Pacific Island. While the details vary, the fundamental concept stays the same. They involve the creation of universe structure from a primordial egg. When the egg breaks, its components form the cosmos. The shell often becomes the sky, the yolk transforms into the sun, and other parts become the earth, the moon, and stars. As an example, in ancient Egypt, a tradition from Hermopolis recount the story of a goose laying the cosmic egg on the first mound of land to emerge from the primeval waters. The sun god emerged then from that egg. Let's move to Persia now. In Zoroastrian cosmology, from the Avesta, the world is conceived as a spherical enclosure where the sky functions as a hard shell protecting the central earth. Finally, in ancient China, you have a giant pangu that hatched from an egg, and its body parts then form the elements of the universe. Story possibly influenced by tradition from India and the Eurasian steppe. This ancient example established the motif's deep roots. Now, when we look at its global distribution in red, alongside the bird diver in blue, we observe that region where both the cosmic egg in red and the bird diver creation myth in blue occur is at the interface of the two regions. It's marked here in yellow. The two motifs are shared there and coexist in a single narrative. For instance, a story compiled in the Finnish national epic, the Kalevala, explicitly links the two motifs. The bird dives specifically to bring up earth to create a place to lay its egg. This observation raises critical question. Why does this mixing occur so consistently at geographic interface? And what does it reveal about the propagation of mythological motifs? To demonstrate that these patterns are not isolated, let's expand the range of examples to more related motifs with mostly a complementary distribution. I've listed here in this table motifs into two sets based on the classification into mythological region as explained in the article that you'll find in the references. The first set contains the bird diver. The second set features the emergence motif and the cosmic egg. But there are many more motifs that I've listed here. Now let's look at the distribution. Blue region covers northern Eurasia and North American areas. The red one, the rest of the world. The blue and red set are separated by a region in which both motifs are recorded. It's indicated by the black dots. And their size is proportional to the number of shared motifs between these two sets. The large-scale distribution is not random. We observe two different patterns. Region of mixing coincide with river networks or a steppe region that serves as a diffusion path where mixing of ideas is favored. The couloir between the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea extending to the northern region is an example. In Northeast Asia, the mixing region corresponds to the boundary between the two motifs. At the boundary, some traditions adopt both motifs, likely due to their relationship with their neighbors. The pattern on the map suggests two distinct models for how motifs mix. We have the preferential diffusion path model. The mixing we see along rivers and steppe, like the Black Sea-Baltic corridor, is a non-random process. These highways are preferential paths that favor the flow and mixing of ideas. The second model, the diffusion barrier model, like the mixing at the Northern Asian boundary. This process creates a front where motifs meet. No such boundaries would form if myths appeared independently. A fine analysis revealed a surprising pattern about diffusion barriers. Let's consider the example of the marking on the moon. The general concept of a figure on the moon is found globally. However, specific submotifs crystallize in different regions and become locked into a widespread local mythological system. The water carrier on the moon, for instance, becomes a standard feature specific to the northern area, the first set, while the rabbit or frog on the moon become standard elsewhere in the second set. Also, both are variations of the figure on the moon. We observe the same phenomenon with the Earth diver creation stories. The general idea of creation involving primal water and an animal intermediary gave rise to different specific narratives relative to a bird or a turtle. Each submotif is mostly confined to one of the two regions. Conclusion: the global geographic segmentation of ancient myths is not a coincidence, but is rather compatible with motif diffusion. The analysis suggests that some prefer diffusion paths, such as those along steppes or rivers, from paths where ideas tend to mix more easily. We've also identified examples of semi-permeable diffusion barriers, where diffusion barriers do not stop the main motif diffusion, but stop submotif. And these boundaries are active zones of interaction where tradition share motifs. Study of this hotspot really deserve more attention, as the underlying mechanisms are far from being completely understood. Next time we'll continue our exploration of creation myths, and here's the main reference if you want to dig into that topic. See you next time. Bye bye.